for the UNX News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the UNX News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to UNX News. I am back after a 4-week hiatus with the horrible flu that's been going around. I hope you don't get it. Hope you never get it. Take some precautions. Take your vitamin C and oregano oil and all of that so that you do not get it. But I am glad to be back, and tonight we have a really good show for you. We're going to be talking about evidence of the afterlife. Before we get started on that, I want you to please check out our blog because I posted a notice today. I posted a blog post about the recent surge in alleged sightings of the Bigfoot creature in Ohio. There have been a lot of reports there in the last few days. Since March 6th to March 10th, they've seen multiple Bigfoot. At least 8 sightings have been reported, and they range in size from 6 feet to 10 feet. So some people speculate that it is a clan or a family that is moving there. Multiple witnesses have seen it. Also, we do have a big conference coming up this month on the 28th. It's UFO Audit. Race Hobbs is handling that one, and he will MC the event. Do check that out on our website at theunexplainednetwork.com. My guest this evening is Jeremy Spillane. He's a new author. He has been married to Caroline for 42 years and has 5 children and 6 grandchildren. They live in East Yorkshire, England. Jeremy had never written a book before. There was never anything that gripped him enough to make him embark on the massive amount of hard work that writing a book entails, and I do agree with that. By his very early 60s, Jeremy accepted the fact that his life was pretty ordinary and simple. Nothing earth-shattering was ever going to happen to him. Then Caroline's parents died. Joan died first, and a few years later, Roger, and we are going to talk about that this evening. Welcome to the program, Jeremy.
Hi, Margie. Thanks ever so much for having me on. It's an honor to be talking to you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's probably very late where you are right now. I think you're about 5 hours behind us.
Yes, that's right. There's been a slight hitch. I thought we were 6 hours behind, so I've had to rush when you were sending me the messages saying that we're live. So anyway, I'm here, and it's great to be talking to you. So as I say, it's an honor to be chatting to you. Thank you.
So as a first-time author, you kind of got thrown into the paranormal. How did that happen?
Well, I'd never believed really in anything paranormal. I was brought up Catholic, and then as a teenager I stopped going to church. My dad was Catholic, and my 2 older brothers, we all went to church each week with him, but as a teenager we all stopped going to church, and I stopped believing in all the ins and outs of religion. I stopped believing in life after death. It just seemed too incredible. So for the next 4 decades or so, I just didn't believe in life after death, and I never really experienced anything. Well, I didn't experience anything paranormal, and it was something I put out of my mind. I didn't really want to believe it. I was scared of the idea of things like ghosts and all the rest of it. As a child, I used to have great trouble sleeping at night in the dark. I used to have nightmares. I used to think I saw monsters. My parents would tell me, "Oh, don't worry, there's no such thing as ghosts." And
yeah,
So I didn't want to believe it, but it was not until my mother-in-law Joan died in 2017, and Caroline and I, we'd been married for almost 40 years at this stage. Joan died really suddenly, and it was a big surprise for everyone. It was always thought my father-in-law Roger would probably die first because he had a whole list of medical problems he'd had over the years, and he'd got through them all. But Joan died suddenly without warning. She had a heart problem, and she just died instantly as she got up out of her chair when Joan and Roger were at home in their living room in East Yorkshire. And she died so suddenly she didn't have time to say goodbye to Roger, and it's the first sudden death we'd had in the family. And as soon as she died, Caroline and I experienced a whole load of signs at our house, and we realized almost straight away this was Joan sending us signs that she was still around somehow. And we had things like televisions turning on in our house. In various rooms, we had a number of televisions, and any of them would start turning on by themselves, particularly in the middle of the night. They would wake us up from our sleep. Our bedside light would turn on, and we had a number of other signs. We had various wildlife, animal creatures that gave us signs that we knew weren't sort of the behavior of ordinary animals, and that was astonishing.
Oh, so, can you give us an example of one of those?
The favorite one of mine, and I love birds. I've always loved birds, and I had a reasonable knowledge of them. And it was 4 days after Joan died, and Caroline, myself, and our beloved pet spaniel Poppy, we were all walking around a local ancient castle near where we lived in Yorkshire, and we were walking around the top of the Earth mound, a grassy slope that surrounds the castle. And we're walking around, and in this tree that was partway down the grassy slope, I saw a bird of prey perched in the tree. And I said to Karen, I'm just going to walk towards that bird, see what it is, because I wasn't quite sure from the distance we were at. And as I walked towards it, this female kestrel, which is a small bird of prey about the size of a pigeon, it flew out of the tree towards the three of us. And it flew round us in two tight circles at low level. And then it went back to the tree and perched again. And that's just not the normal behavior of a wild animal.
No.
Some people have said to me, well, it's a bird of prey. Might it have been eyeing up our dog as a meal? But our dog was 30 odd pounds in weight. It was not a lightweight dog. And these birds normally would hunt small creatures like little mice, etc. So it definitely wasn't behaving like an ordinary bird of prey, and I knew that was a sign from Joan. So and we had butterfly signs and various other things, over the next year or two, and we've had some amazing ones of those which I've loved, and we've had all sorts of other traditional signs that spirits give, like feathers in weird places, like in the house where there's no birds at all. And it's just been so many signs from Joan. Caroline smelt her perfume in the house. Suddenly she get the really strong smell of her mum's perfume, and we knew that was Joan. So we tried telling Caroline's dad Roger at the time about these signs, and Roger didn't believe in life after death. He'd always been adamant to me that when you die, that's the end. There's nothing, and he lived his life on that basis. And he obviously had a long list of things he was wanting to do with his life, and he lived his life on the basis of trying to cram it all in before he died. And Roger, similar to me, had been brought up a Christian. That's how Joan and Roger met, through their church. They were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they met each other at their church, and then they got married after falling in love, and they had two daughters, and Caroline, my wife, is the elder of the two daughters, Alison being the younger one. So they had the two daughters, and then they stopped going to their church. I think they were busy with the children, and Roger apparently stopped believing in his faith, and he, like me, spent the rest of his life not believing in life after death. And he was open to persuasion. I think he was always open to if he saw the evidence, he could have been persuaded in it, but he never saw it. So he did read books. He was an avid passionate book lover. He was a highly educated man. He was a graduate from Oxford University in the UK, and he was a teacher in his first few years, and then his career sort of went in other directions. But education, knowledge, and books were his three main passions in life. So even though he read about other religions, he obviously never found anything that he thought, oh yes, this is true. He did for a while, perhaps a couple of decades before he died, he did for a while think maybe the Quakers were the religion for him, and he went to their meetings, but he decided that wasn't for him. So he's right up to the end, he didn't believe in life after death. So when Caroline and I told him about these signs that we had from Joan, as we were convinced they were, he just didn't know what to say. He didn't say anything. He was dumbfounded, and he just didn't talk, and he had a strange expression on his face, and he obviously thought Caroline and I were total nutcases, and he just didn't talk about it even. After 2 or 3 attempts, we sort of stopped trying to talk to him about these amazing signs from Joan, and from his reaction, we were convinced that he wasn't getting any signs from her in his house. And also Caroline's younger sister, Alison, when we told her, she I think, probably thought similar to her dad, and she presumably didn't have any signs either. So for some reason, Caroline and I were convinced that we were the only ones getting the signs from Joan, but we loved them and we welcomed them. So even when Joan woke us up in the middle of the night and turned the television on, or the bedside light, or whatever it was, we sort of knew it was her, and we talked to her and said, "Oh, that's you, isn't it, Joan? And thanks for that. That's an amazing thing." And I was completely in awe of what she was doing. And at that instant, in December 2017, I knew that suddenly I was convinced there was life after death, and Joan was proving it to us. And I believe that because she had died so suddenly, not even having had a chance to say goodbye to her husband, Roger, that was probably the reason why she gave us the signs, because she had never had a chance to say goodbye to anyone.
Have you wondered if Roger actually, if she tried to contact him, but he didn't pay attention to the signs?
I think I've thought about this obviously a lot over the years since, and I'm pretty sure that she didn't give him the signs because she knew what Roger's beliefs were. And he would have known that had she given him a sign similar to what she gave us, he might have been so freaked out. He might have had his own heart attack, because he did have his own heart problems, and she was, I think, wanting to spare him the shock of giving him a sign. So I think she probably just gave it to Caroline and myself because she somehow sensed that we would welcome any signs, and we would be able to deal with the signs. And I don't think Roger would have been able to deal with signs that we had. I think it could have been too much for his heart, and he just probably wouldn't have survived such an amazing sign had he realized what the sign was. So yeah, that I'm pretty sure he didn't get any signs from Joan.
And then how much later was it until Roger passed?
Well, it was just over 4 years. So Joan died December 2017, just before Christmas, and obviously it was a massive shock for everyone. The whole family, for Roger, for Alice and Caroline and myself, and we were all dumbfounded. And we'd all thought that Roger would die first because of his long list of medical problems, and he would often talk about his health issues, but Joan sort of was a bit quieter and didn't really make a great deal of the, couple of health issues that she had, really. So what happened was we were living about 30 miles away from Joan and Roger at that time. We were in West Yorkshire, and we had a food business, a fish and chip shop, and we lived over the business. And Roger was in East Yorkshire in Howden. So once Joan had died, we decided to sell up our business and move over to be near Roger, to sort of be closer to him, to keep him company, to visit him a lot more regularly. And it was to help us get through the shock of the thing as well. And so we sold up the business and moved to within 3 or 4 miles of Roger, in the nearby town to where he lived. And we semi-retired. So I got a part-time job as a school bus driver, which was ideal. I just worked mornings and afternoons, and then had school holidays. So we had a lot more time, having moved to the area, and we kept Roger company. We would visit him daily, and we would help each other to get through the shock of Joan having died. So that worked very well. And then COVID struck, as it did everywhere worldwide, and that was a massive shock for everyone. And very fortunately, Roger didn't get COVID, but his illnesses did catch up with him. So the last year or two of his life, he did start having sort of major health issues, and he was in hospital a fair bit. And in the last year of his life, he was in hospital a lot. When he wasn't in hospital, then he'd be back home, and we would do everything we could to help him get through his problems. But while COVID was going on, and all the terrible sort of rules and regulations we had, as I'm sure you had in America as well, but in the UK we had some very severe rules at various times, and we weren't allowed to visit people, except as an elderly person, we could visit Roger, as a carer, as carers. And in the UK, we, for a while during these lockdowns, we were allowed one bit of daily exercise where we could leave the house. So what we used to do, Caroline and I, is we would take our beloved spaniel out for a long walk in the local park in the car. We'd drive there to the local park because it wasn't that close for the elderly dog to walk the distance. We'd give Poppy a good walk, and then we'd drive on, see Roger, and see if he needed anything taken to him that day. And we would perhaps sneak a drink with him in the house, if it was the middle of winter, for instance, freezing weather. We just didn't feel up to sitting out in the garden, and didn't think it was right. Roger did either. So we would sneak into his house, into the living room, perhaps have a cup of coffee with him, and even if that wasn't strictly allowed. And we were breaking the rules, but we were trying to keep
our... turns out the rules didn't matter anyway.
Yeah, we were trying to keep our sanity. It was just mental torture for everyone, and we want to go out of our minds with it. And to be honest, Caroline's younger sister Alison would frown upon us for breaking these rules, and she wasn't really approving of what we were doing some of the time. But we thought, well, hell, we just got to sort of keep our sanity, all of us, and that's what we did. And it worked well. As I say, Roger didn't get COVID, which was so lucky, because we did know people who got it and died from it, and it was such a terrible disease and so traumatic. The process for people who did get it and die under all those rules, they couldn't have visitors at various times, and at funerals they could perhaps only have, I don't know, something like 5 people at the funeral. It was ludicrous, and it was so inhuman. It was just terrible. But Roger didn't get that, but he did get various illnesses, and was in hospital for long periods that last year or so. So in 2022, April 2022, just over 4 years since Joan died, then Roger went into hospital for the last time, and the last period he was there, he was in hospital for a week. And on the last day, then Caroline got a call from the hospital saying, you might want to come down and be with your dad. I think this might have been around the Easter time or something like that. And Caroline she went down. She said the nurse didn't sound as if it was an urgent thing. So Caroline went down, thought, this is a bit odd. She said, I can go down if I want, but don't hurry. There's no great rush. But anyway, Caroline got there, and she sat with her dad, and he was obviously pretty out of it at this time. He was still conscious, but he wasn't sort of looking properly, and he wasn't talking properly. But Caroline held his hand, and then Roger died, and it was a surprise. Even though we knew he was ill, none of us thought he was going to go at that exact moment. And so Caroline was the only one with him when he died, holding his hand. And once
Well, that's good.
it was good. Yes, it was great. She was with him, of course, and obviously the nurse knew that he was on his last legs, and Caroline did get there in time, which was so lucky. And it wasn't a pleasant experience, so Caroline said, but often that's the case when people go. But so Caroline rang me and told me, and rang her sister Alison, and so Alison, her husband Colin, and myself, the three of us, we went down to the hospital, and then we joined Caroline and her dad, who had just died, and we were there with him, and that was the end. So Roger had just died, and 3 weeks after he died, actually, there was a local medium performing, who we had seen a few times. We'd been recommended to this Stephen Holbrook, the medium. He only did public shows. He didn't do one-to-ones, but he did public shows, and he would do them in our area. But he travelled the whole country doing these shows, and he was very popular. But it was Colin, Alison's husband, who had recommended him to us a few years previously. So when Colin's dad had died, Colin had seen an advert for this Stephen Holbrook in the local paper doing a show nearby, and Colin, even though he knew nothing about Stephen Holbrook, the medium, he thought to himself, I need to go and see him. He got a feeling that his dad might come through with a message for Colin. So Colin went to see Stephen Holbrook, and sure enough, Colin's dad did come through with an amazing message through Stephen, and Colin said the message was so accurate. He knew it was his dad sort of communicating with him from the afterlife. So it's Colin that had recommended Stephen Holbrook to us, and we had seen him a few times over the next few years before Roger died, and we'd never had any personal messages for Caroline or myself. And we could see that people who did get messages, they were really impressed with Stephen Holbrook, but we'd had nothing. So 3 weeks after Roger had died, and I said to Karen, we ought to go to this show, even though it's pretty soon since your dad died. I said, I just get a feeling we might get a message from Roger. So the four of us went to see Stephen Holbrook, Alison, her husband Colin, and Caroline, and the four of us went. And amazingly, we did get a message from Roger, and it was absolutely spot on. And it was definitely Roger giving us the message that he was around. So some of the things he said in this message through Stephen were, he said Caroline was the only one with him in the hospital when he died, holding his hand. And that was absolutely true. And he knew that the three others of us had joined her in the hospital. Again, true. He said that... he said that when he died, it didn't hurt. There was no pain, and it was all okay. It wasn't a problem dying. He said that he'd been buried with the wrong shoes on. He'd got brown shoes instead of black, and that was absolutely true. It was planned he'd have black shoes, but for some reason the black shoes couldn't be located. So when he was dressed in his coffin, he had some brown shoes, which didn't show, but that's right.
Oh my, that's funny.
It is quite hilarious, to be honest. Another thing he said was that he was buried with a selection of books in his coffin. Again, absolutely true. So Caroline and Alison had selected some of his maybe favorite books to have with him when he was buried. That's absolutely
so big surprise for Roger. There is an afterlife.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final sign that springs to mind is as he left his house for the last time with the ambulance people, a week before he died, he asked one of the ambulance people to move these 3 new plants he had. They were climbing plants in little pots in his porch. And he'd asked the ambulance man to put them in the garden so that they get some rain while he was in the hospital so they wouldn't die. And that's another part of the message through Stephen Holbrook. He said, one want people to look after these 3 new climbing plants. Again, absolutely true. So yeah, suddenly Roger, the great skeptic who was convinced or certain there was no afterlife, suddenly he finds himself still alive in the afterlife. And it was obviously a big surprise for him. And I think it was a very pleasant surprise. But whatever situation, he found that he's lost his physical body, which was obviously had packed up and was no good to him anymore, but he finds that he's still there in the afterlife, which was incredible. So as with Joan, when she gave us all the signs after she'd died and Roger didn't talk to us about them and didn't respond to our telling him about them, then suddenly Roger starts giving us a load of signs, and we knew they were Roger. And again, they were within a day or so of him dying. And at our house, we were getting these signs, and they were different to Joan's signs. So we knew they were from Roger because they suddenly started, whereas Joan's signs had sort of petered out to a large extent over the 4 years that she had been dead for. But with Roger, they were still electrical signs, but different ones to what Joan gave us. So Roger was doing things like turning our lights.
Jeremy, we're going to take a short break here. Okay. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the signs and some evidence. And we've got some photos to show. Okay. Where can people get your book, Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife?
Well, it's available now to pre-order on Amazon or anywhere that sells books. There's Barnes and Noble, Walmart in the UK. There's the there's the Guardian bookshop. Anywhere that sells books, basically. So if you look on Amazon and just put in Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife, it comes up really easily. You can see the listing. There's a very good description. There's the front cover, and you can read all about it, and you can pre-order, and then it'll be sent out to you when it's published at the end of April, beginning of May, and you don't pay anything till they send it out to you. So
okay. All right, that sounds great. Well, we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Jeremy Spillane.
The conversation around UFOs has never been more serious or more complicated. On Saturday, March the 28th, from noon to 5 p.m. Eastern, the Unexplained Network presents UFO Audit, a digital conference taking a hard look at the current state of the UFO movement, featuring Micah Hanks, John Burroughs, Chiago Tichetti, and David Marler. 4 respected voices. No hype, just real analysis. This is a free virtual event, so come be a part of the discussion and register now at theunexplainednetwork.com. That's theunexplainednetwork.com. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we're back on Margie K with UNX News, and my guest this evening is Jeremy Spillane. We're talking about his book, Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife. And Jeremy, you sent me some photos, so why don't I pop these up and you explain what we're looking at? Of course, this is your book cover.
It is. If I could just say something quickly before I talk about the book cover. Because of the rush, and I was a few minutes late coming on to your show at the beginning, I didn't have time to tell you that to my side is a little computer screen here, and this is the SLS camera, and you probably or hopefully can see a green stick figure on it.
Yes,
and that
yes.
actually is Roger, and surprisingly enough, I put the equipment on just in case Roger turned up this evening, and he did, and he was showing before we got the show going, and he's still there, so you can see him stood basically next to me. So
I noticed that earlier. I wonder what that was. Well, hello, Roger.
Fantastic. And whenever I put this special SLS camera on, Roger generally shows up. Now, he doesn't show up every time. There have been odd times when he hasn't shown up, but generally he does. And this is one of the bits of ghost hunting equipment I got, which I'll talk about later. But so it's great to have him here, and it shows how keen he is to join us in this discussion, and basically to verify that he is alive in the afterlife, and you can literally see him. So bear in mind, he is an invisible spirit, and this special camera can detect the spirit, and where it sees a spirit, it puts a stick figure on because it can sense there is something there. Somehow Roger, his electrical energy is having an effect on the atmosphere, I believe, and the camera's infrared dots. It sends out 1 million infrared dots, and it can sense the movement. And what I think is happening is, from everything I've read and sort of talked to people over the years, I think that the infrared dots are getting moved fractionally by the electrical charge, and I think it's probably the water vapor in the air that gets marginally displaced by the electric charge, which is Roger, and the camera can sense the slight movement of these water molecules, and it knows there's something there, so it puts the stick figure on where it senses that there is a spirit. But bear in mind, it's a spirit seems to be a cloud of energy of some sort. These cameras were actually designed for tracking physical human beings, people who were alive with a physical body, but somehow ghost hunters realized they could see spirits, and they obviously can, and I've had it scientifically verified, which I'll come on to later. So yeah, that's great that Roger's there. But going back to what you were saying, the book cover that's right, this is a still picture from, this is Aaron Lomas. He is a Society for Psychical Research member. Aaron Lomas was a PhD student at Northampton University in the UK, a parapsychology student, and Northampton University seems to be a main centre for studies of this nature. And so Aaron, after quite a convoluted business, I got in touch with the Society for Psychical Research, who are the oldest organisation in the world set up to look for evidence of life after death. And Aaron came to investigate Roger up at our house in Yorkshire, and he was there for the weekend, and I went through everything with him. And I said, what would it take you to, agree that this SLS camera can see a spirit? Because skeptics say it can't. They think it's just the camera's picking up on all the fancy wallpaper that you can see in our room, or shapes, the furniture, whatever. And Aaron Lomas said, if we could see the camera seeing a spirit in a totally neutral environment, like a totally plain white wall, in a plain white room, then he said, I would accept that's a spirit, and that's what happened. So that was that picture that you saw there, that Roger showing up. This is the book, and what happened was that every time I turned the ghost hunting equipment on, which I got about 6 or 7 months after Roger died, Karen persuaded me to get this equipment because I've been investigating since Joan died. I've been reading up all the books I could find and watching all the programs, and I watched ghost hunting programs, and I saw what equipment worked. And eventually I was persuaded by Karen to get some equipment, and I only got it to search for Joan and Roger. I didn't get it to do general ghost hunting because that sort of thing did scare me. But I got the equipment, and then I took videos, and as you can see, it worked. And I recorded all the videos that I took. So we ended up with a lot of videos of Roger and occasionally Joan on camera. And after a while, I realized, Roger loved books. And I realized I was going to have to write a story about, write up the experiences of Joan and Roger in book form and somehow incorporate all the videos. And initially, I wasn't sure how to do that. But then eventually, I got the idea of putting a QR code on the book front cover. And from that, people can access our YouTube channel using their smartphone, and they can see all the various videos which are associated with the book. So each chapter in the book has a video associated with it, and the chapter in the book describes what you're seeing in that video. So anyone who buys the book who's interested enough can see the video and see what's going on. But people can still read the book and not watch the videos if they're that way inclined. But
that's a really good idea. I love that idea. I'm going to have to steal it.
Yeah, well, QR codes are getting very popular, very common these days, aren't they? But I just wasn't sure. I knew that if I had pictures in the book, it wouldn't work the same as seeing an actual video of it, and it would also make the book more expensive to publish having pictures in it. And I knew that would make our chances of getting a book publishing deal a lot less easy. So I thought if I just have it on the front cover in the form of the QR code and have these really accessible. Yes. So if anyone wants to look on Amazon or whatever, look at our book listing, you'll see that front cover there, and that QR code will actually work, and you can watch the videos now if you want to. So each chapter has a video, but there are other videos as well, which are sort of extra ones, which we've done since the book was written, and they're all obviously fascinating. So anyone who's particularly interested, there's a video and it's entitled SPR Investigator Confirms SLS Camera Sees Genuine Spirit, and it's a 6-minute 1-second runtime, and it is basically the highlights of when we were at Northampton University, me and the investigator Aaron Lomas. And I'd already sent him an SLS camera to get familiar with them. He knew of them, but he wasn't familiar. So I sent him one, and he studied it extensively to see what it could do and all the adjustments that apparently it has, which I've never touched myself. And we were doing various tests side by side with these two cameras. And then while he was taking all his notes and everything, sat at his desk, I put my camera on. And after some time, it took over half an hour for Roger to show up. This university was 150 miles away from where I lived, and I'd asked Roger if he would show up. I said it's important. We need scientific verification in the book, so that people believe that we are seeing spirits and I'm not just some crackpot, with some ghost hunting gadgets. And I wanted people to take this book seriously, and so I wanted Roger to show up. So after half an hour, he hadn't shown up, so I turned my camera off because it's a very sophisticated device that runs on a tablet computer, and as always, computers can play up. So I turned it off and restarted it, and then within a few minutes, Roger did show up. So he showed up for about 4 minutes on this plain white background, and I said to Aaron, I'm recording this, and I'll show you when Roger disappears or whatever. And I showed Aaron, and while Roger was still showing up, I said to Aaron, is there anything else you need me to do to convince you that this camera is seeing a spirit on the camera? And Aaron said, no, that's it. So he did accept that the camera really does see genuine spirits, and so that's what you're seeing there. So normally Roger shows up on the camera, but just occasionally Joan will show up. So as in life, Joan would tend to sort of be in the background more. Roger tended to lead the way with anything of this nature. For instance, Roger would be the main instigator, and Joan would sort of just show up if she thought there was a good reason to. If she wasn't bored with what was going on, she would show her face basically. And Roger would often take over a project that Joan started. So as in the Afterlife, Joan started with all the signs, and then Roger dies, and then Roger takes over the project, and he carries on where Joan sort of started it.
Fascinating.
That's how it is now. But I realised that even with our ghost hunting equipment, which Caroline persuaded me to get, which, as I say, I got just on the basis of searching for her mum and dad's spirits on camera to prove that they're there in the afterlife, and it worked far better than I ever imagined. And Roger loved electronic gadgets, so it's totally appropriate that he would use these gadgets to show up to us, and it makes total sense. So even though this is a serious bit of proof of life after death, life after physical death, even though it's a serious bit of proof, using ghost hunting gadgets, I don't let it put anyone off, because it is a serious study, and Roger is using these gadgets, which I had seen in ghost hunting programs, which I'd seen working. So as soon as Joan died, I watched all these ghost hunting programs, and there were a few bits of equipment that I could see did seem to genuinely work. So as I say, we were persuaded, and the first bit of kit I got is this. It's called this K2 meter. It's here, if you can just see it. It's got some little LEDs that light up if there's a strong electric field around. And these weren't designed for ghost hunting. They were designed just to detect what the electric field is around a piece of equipment, say like your microwave oven or your television set or whatever, just to check that there was a safe level of electric field, for people, for humans. And ghost hunters found that these bits of equipment worked. So this is the first bit of equipment I got, which we took to Joan and Roger's cemetery, to the grave, about 6 or 7 months after they died. And I turned this on at their grave, and the grave is hundreds of yards from the road. It's not near any electric cables or any electric lights. And as soon as I turned this on, we had a conversation with Roger, and I said, "Roger, are you there?" And he flashes the K2 meter lights really strongly, and basically I could tell it was him. And I'm saying, "That's you, Roger, isn't it? You're there." And he flashes the lights. So I said, "Well, Caroline's persuaded me to get some equipment. This is the first bit, but because you're using it so well, I'm going to get 2 more bits of equipment. One is called an SLS camera, which, if it works, we might see you on the camera. And the other is called an Ovilus 3, and it's like an electronic talking dictionary, and it's got a database in it of over 2,000 words, and somehow spirits can use these devices, and they were designed to communicate with spirits, and they do actually work somehow. So on the Ovilus, Roger can select a word, and it'll show the word on a screen, and it'll actually speak the word as well. And these things are obsolete. Even when I got it, they were sort of 15 or so years old or more, and they were in great demand, and especially after COVID, things like this were sort of in short supply. So the Ovilus I bought secondhand, and it came from America, and it cost nearly £1,000, and that's sort of well over $1,000 at the time. But it does work. Roger can use it, and the SLS camera also came from America. And as soon as I
those are pretty standard pieces of equipment that most paranormal investigation teams use. And I will tell you, what my experience with those is, they do work. So that's the nice thing about electronics, electronic equipment, is that you can show something, you can show some evidence besides, some of us are psychics and we see these things anyway, but you can't show someone else what you're looking at. So the equipment really helps with that. I'm glad about that. We do have a quick question from the chat. Did they tell you if they knew when they died, or that they still know what's going on in this life?
Well, once I'd got the equipment, and as I say, it was astounding that it worked straight away. And as soon as I turned it on in the cemetery, I saw Roger on the SLS camera, and he did use the odd word on the Ovilus, the occasional word he'd come out with that was absolutely spot on. But a lot of words on the Ovilus he wouldn't I wouldn't know what he meant by them, so I didn't know if he'd selected them, deliberately or not. But as soon as I got the Ovilus, and I could tell that it wasn't like an ordinary conversation, and at that point I realized I needed to get the help of mediums. So I contacted a few mediums, and initially I had trouble getting anyone. Some of them were very dismissive of what I was doing, said, "You're going to cause problems for your parents-in-law's spirits. You're going to trap them here on Earth, and they'll be trapped souls, and they can't move on to the afterlife." And I was really frightened of that. I didn't want to do them any harm, obviously. But one medium was very positive, and she was called Annie Mather, and she's featured in the book. And she's familiar with all this equipment. She uses it herself, as well as being a great medium. So we had a reading with her. We went to her house, and we got some amazing readings from Roger through her. And we also had two other mediums. So we had Stephen Holbrook, who was brilliant, but he would only do public shows. But even though he wouldn't do any one-to-ones with me, subsequently he did agree for me to use my equipment at one of his shows, and we filmed, and we did see a number of spirits. And one of them, Caroline is sure, is her dad, when he's pointing to Stephen Holbrook's books that he's talking about in his interval, which are for sale. And then the third medium is Liz Murphy, who's an American medium, who we had a session with her on the iPad. Caroline's in our living room in the UK. Liz is in America, and we had an amazing session with her that went on over an hour. And Joan and Roger are there on the camera, as you can see, as stick figures, and they're sat with Caroline on our settee and around the settee in Yorkshire, while Liz is giving us this reading. And she had the most amazing messages, especially from Joan. They were so spot on, and she was saying things to Caroline. She was saying, "Did your mum, did she have lots of children? I can see your mum with loads of children around her." And Caroline said, "No, there's only me and my sister. I don't understand that." And then suddenly it hit Caroline. She said, "Oh, yes, of course. My mum was a nursery nurse, and she was surrounded by children in her job, and she loved children. So that's what you're seeing." So through Liz Murphy, we did actually ask questions of, what's it like in the afterlife, and where are you, basically? And Liz sort of did give us some good answers, and it's actually there in the Liz Murphy chapter. There's a long video that you can access on our YouTube channel of Liz Murphy, and in the video, and I think it goes on for 45 minutes or more, Liz is giving us the readings, but also she's explaining how mediums work and what she sees, and she does answer some of these questions of, what's it like in the afterlife, etc. Mm-hmm. So I can't remember any specific answers, but basically Joan and Roger can come and go freely. They're definitely not trapped, as Ali Mather confirmed. So basically, whenever we as physical human beings think of our past relatives or whoever who are in the afterlife, as soon as we think of them, instantly they're there with us, and you can see the proof that we just think of them, or they know that we're thinking about them, or whatever, and they're there. And Roger's proving that. So he's there with me, literally in the room where I am now. But when I'm not thinking about him, he's elsewhere in the afterlife, wherever that is. Now, I don't know, haven't really got the answers, to be honest, whether the afterlife is just around us here on Earth and the spirits are with us on Earth, which I know they are, but do they reside normally in another part of the universe, or just sort of beyond the Earth somewhere? I'm not exactly sure, but I've read lots of books by the mediums, and as far as I can gather, when we die, our soul initially goes to somewhere called the Summerlands, which seems to be like a utopia, and it's a bit like Earth, but the colors are more vivid, and it's just more beautiful than Earth, and everyone is totally happy. There's no conflict, as there obviously is at the moment on Earth in quite a terrible way, and it's absolute bliss. And that's where the spirits go initially. And it does seem, from what I read, since I actually wrote the book, I read one particularly interesting book by a medium who seems to have a fantastic knowledge of all this, and she talks about trapped spirits, etc., which I didn't know at the time. But our initial spiritual body seems to be basically a human physical body shaped spirit, but obviously it's got no physical mass or weight to it, although it is very much like our human body, our physical body, but it's completely non-physical, spiritual, and that seems to be what we've got initially. So maybe that's why the SLS camera does see actual limbs, and that maybe there are sort of, maybe the shape of that spirit initially does have legs and arms, which I wasn't sure about when I wrote the book. But so yeah, the afterlife, it's all around us, but it could be elsewhere as well. So as I say, maybe it's all over the place, in the universe, and literally around us in our own houses as well. So I'm not exactly sure. So
we're going to run out of time here, Roger. We just have a few more minutes. I want to go through these pictures real quick. What is this first one?
Well, this is a still taken. Caroline took this. It was actually taken from a video. I think this was about a year or more after Roger died, actually. So Caroline was working for the local newspaper in the town where we live, the Gould Times. And one day at work, she just, for some reason, was compelled to look out her window while at work. And she looked out, and it was, as you can see, a lovely day with a clear blue sky, and above the building opposite where her office was, looking out, she saw all these lights dancing around in the sky above the rooftops. And so after a while, she got her phone out to take a video, and she didn't capture all the lights that she'd seen dancing around, but there was just one thing flying down from the sky, and it was this creature. It was when you study this, slow it down and look at the stills of the frames that were happening, this creature flies down at amazing speed in a straight line from the sky, and it's got a black body, as you can see, which looks solid, no light coming through it, and then it's got these luminous white wings, and it's actually, in each still, you can see the wings sort of beating. So there, the wings are obviously folded in, and then the thing disappears into the brickwork of the building opposite. So comparing the size to the bricks, it seems to be the size of a small bird, but it definitely isn't a physical bird of any sort. And literally, the creature does disappear into the brick, where you can see that little white light in the middle there. And we're not sure what it was, but to be honest, we've got no idea. But this appeared to be one of the lights that Caroline had seen, and this is the only one she actually caught on the video. But as I say, there'd been sort of dozens of these lights sort of dancing around and going into and out of the building opposite. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts, Margie, on what it is, but it's definitely something supernatural of some sort, as far as we can tell. So any ideas?
Well, I will tell you, I accidentally remote view whenever somebody's talking about something. So I'm hearing Faye, that this is a fairy type of an energy, but
Right.
it is related to Joan and Roger. I'm hearing messages, that they bring messages.
Okay. Right.
So definitely an energy that Caroline has developed as far as a level of consciousness to the point where she can see and communicate with these things.
Right.
That's what I'm getting.
That's amazing. That could be true. Something made her look out the window at that exact moment, and then she saw these dozens of bright white lights just dancing around in the sky above the building and going into and out of the building. So that would fit. She obviously had something telling her look out the window and eventually get your camera out and film them. And
right.
So that does make sense. So it's just incredible. But yeah, everything we've experienced since Joan died and since Roger died and took over from Joan, giving us a whole load of signs. It's just totally mind blowing. It's something that we never ever foresaw happening. And we just still can't believe it, to be honest. It's just incredible.
Well, it sounds amazing. The book sounds amazing. Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife. Check Amazon.com. Use the QR code and watch the videos. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jeremy. This was absolutely fascinating.
Oh, that's been an absolute pleasure, Margie. It's been fantastic, and I've loved talking to you. It's been great. And if I could just really say quickly, I did see one of your episodes with James Fox about Moment of Contact, and I was so impressed with him. And I watched that film that he'd done, and the proof he got from first-hand accounts from people about UFOs and that, I just couldn't believe that. I was just absolutely in awe. And these are all things that have all come to me since Joan died in my research, and there's just so much, and it's just this whole
there's a lot, Jeremy. All right, thank you so much for being with me this evening. I hope you'll come back sometime.
I will. I'd love to. That's fantastic. Thanks ever so much. And
all right, well, that's another wrap up for NX News. I'll see you here again next week for another great show.